You're listening to the Martin Clinic Wellness Podcast. This is the show where we bring you the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You will also hear what works and doesn't work so that you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started. Hey, we want to thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Tony Martin Jr., the Martin Clinic, and I'm here with my dad, Dr. Tony Martin Sr., also of the Martin Clinic. And this week on podcast episode 99, which just happens to be the, in my opinion, the best hockey player of all time, Wayne Gretzky. So in honor of Wayne Gretzky, we're doing this episode for him in case he ever decides to look us up and have a listen to it. But we want to talk about, it's funny, right? A couple weeks ago, the American Heart Association, they probably haven't been in the news for a while, so they decide to come out and say that coconut oil is bad for you.
Yeah.
Coconut oil is the devil because it's high in saturated fat. And, of course, saturated fat raises cholesterol. And, cholesterol's the boogeyman. And you don't want to have high cholesterol. So, you better stay away from coconut oil, even though the studies weren't on coconut oil, which is funny.
Yeah.
Right? So the American Heart Association comes out and goes after coconut oil, even though the studies they're talking about weren't on coconut oil. All things being equal. Anyways, it's so frustrating. And again, remember, this is the same organization that put their health heart check on sugary cereals and would tell you that an avocado is bad for you, right?
Yeah.
So, take that.
The heart on the box is you eat this stuff, you're going to get a heart attack.
Yeah, take it with a grain of salt. We've joked about that before. That we always want to thank the American Heart Association for putting their heart check on something, because that usually means if you eat this, you're going to get a heart attack. But anyways, so again, all this boils down to the whole cholesterol boogeyman. Now, in our newsletter that we put out, we on this specifically, we put an image of the donations to the American Heart Association. And, you look at a company like AstraZeneca, who, last year gave them, 2016, gave them, I think, $12 million. And in 2017 is committed to $15 million. And of course, AstraZeneca, is the maker of Crestor, which is a statin drug. So, of course, the American Heart Association's got to make cholesterol the devil so that, anyways. Yeah, you could see already this gets us riled up. So, but let's just talk about even a couple studies that have come out this year, just on cholesterol this year. So, a study that was interesting that was published that caught our attention was, and this is the title here: most major heart attacks occur in people with normal cholesterol.
Yeah.
Normal cholesterol.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. So most major heart attacks occur in people with normal cholesterol.
You wouldn't believe it. For all the people that come into my office, come into the clinic and ask, I ask them the question, if they've had a heart attack. And I see several, probably several hundred people a year that have already had a heart attack, men and women. And I ask them, first question, I already know that they're on medication. But the second question I ask them, so they're always on statin drugs. If you've had a heart attack, it's part of the protocol of cardiologists, right, to put you on a statin drug. But I always ask them this question, well, what were your cholesterol numbers? Like, were they high? And you know what? Over 90%, and I mean this, over 90% of the people in my office that have had a heart attack have told me that no, my cholesterol levels were normal, but they were doing it as a preventative measure. I was being put on a statin drug as a prevention. I said, well, you mean you didn't even have high cholesterol? Well, how did you get a heart attack? Of course, I already knew why they got a heart attack because of the other things that I check for, right? Inflammation, we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But isn't it crazy? But they've made that, like you say, it's the boogeyman, and they need my dad said you need a cat to kick, and I'm the cat, when I used to bug him. But, And
Can I just say I've never
collect-
heard that saying in my lifetime.
No, eh?
Never
You
heard
need
that.
a cat. To
That's a
kick?
generational thing.
Oh, it is.
I have
Okay.
never heard that saying in my lifetime.
Well, it wouldn't be politically correct to say it today, right? But no, but that was an expression we used to use. Honest, okay? You need people my age.
So, again, they blame cholesterol. And, studies are showing that when it comes to heart attacks, it's not the best indicator of heart attacks. So let's talk a little bit about what are better indicators. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned inflammation.
Yeah.
Everybody who has a heart attack has elevated inflammation levels.
Yep. That's invariable. Yep.
So inflammation is a much better marker. So let's talk about inflammation for a bit. How does a person, where does inflammation come from? It's funny, like inflammation is the root of a lot of diseases in a lot of ways. But inflammation doesn't just spontaneously show up. And we've talked about this before, but it's worth repeating. Inflammation you can find inflammation in all disease. You can find inflammation in, pretty much everything that ails a human, from joint pain to disease.
Yeah.
But where does that inflammation come from? It doesn't just show up on its own. There are a lot of causes of inflammation, but you can boil it down to some big ones. I'm a big fan of the 80-20 rule, right? I'm a huge fan of the 80-20 rule. And, some of you may have heard the 80-20 rule, and other ones, may not have heard of the 80-20 rule. But if you can cover 80% of the issues by talking about one, let's talk about some of the big factors that will affect 80% of the causes of inflammation. So let's talk about that. Well, obviously a big one when it comes to inflammation is insulin.
Yeah.
And let's
Food.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about, here's another study I'm just looking at here that was done not that long ago, actually just published in 2017. And they found, again, an association between fasting insulin and high sensitivity C-reactive protein. Yeah. So, again, C-reactive protein is just a measurement of inflammation. And they found, the conclusion was higher level of fasting insulin is positively associated with high risk C-reactive protein. So again, inflammation, which is found in disease, joint pain, heart attacks,
diabetes,
is caused...
all autoimmune diseases.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So if a person is insulin resistant, they're at a much higher risk for inflammation.
Yeah.
So again, let's go back one step. You have heart disease, go back one step, you have inflammation. Let's go back one step, you have insulin. As for a lot of people, and Dr. Kraft studied this a lot. He basically said that anybody with any kind of heart, high blood pressure, any kind is basically
any metabolic syndrome.
It's just undiagnosed
all, right?
diabetes.
Yeah.
It's insulin that causes it. That causes it all, right?
Yeah.
So again, you have heart disease. You go back one layer, you peel one layer, and you got inflammation. You peel that layer back, and you got high insulin. So again, now we find ourselves on episode 99 talking about insulin, just like we have on pretty much 99 of our other podcasts.
Well, if we didn't, we're doing a disservice.
Yeah, we're missing the boat. So again,
we're food people. We do clinical nutrition. Hopefully, we're going to talk about food, which is the most important medicine you'll take every day, right?
And that's what's good about this, in a sense, is that we're bringing it always back to food and what you can do from a practical standpoint, rather than just talking about drugs. So, but let's just come at this from a little bit of a different angle, just for this aspect here. So again, we talk about insulin. Now, a lot of times people ask us, how do you know if you're insulin resistant? And the funny thing is, a lot of people just assume that, well, only somebody with obesity has insulin resistance, and that's not true. In fact, a study that was actually published again 2017 found that obesity only predicts about 15% of insulin resistance. So 85% of the time, obesity is not a great indication.
Yeah.
Most people that are obese have a form of insulin resistance, but just because they're not obese doesn't mean they don't have
You
insulin
can be
resistance.
very unhealthy and be tiny, very unhealthy.
Well, and we like to we've used this example before, is that you can get insulin resistance in anywhere, in a sense. It could show up so differently for so many different people. So if only 15% of the people can predict it via obesity, 85% of the people out there walking around basically have insulin resistance and they're not obese. So they wouldn't even think that they have an issue.
Yeah.
And
they're creating a lot of inflammation, which is a silent killer, right?
also, a lot of the times, and this is something else that's interesting. So you can have a person that's not obese, and you can also have a person that has normal blood sugar levels. Because we hear this a lot. Well, I'm not overweight, and my blood sugar levels are good. Therefore, I must not have insulin resistance. And that's not true again. It's not true. Insulin resistance, or problems with insulin, the inability to metabolize carbohydrates precedes blood sugar issues by years or even decades for some people.
Yeah.
So you can be normal weight and have normal blood sugar levels and still have insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is tough to just by going on obesity or blood sugar levels.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people that have, insulin resistance really is a silent killer for a lot of people, except that it is giving your body clues.
Yeah.
We just came out with our latest program, Serial Killers Revisited, which, people are getting tremendous results on already. And, we talk about all the different ways that insulin resistance can pop up, right? We've talked about this on previous podcasts, even as simple as skin tags,
Yeah.
even as simple as carpal tunnel syndrome, sore Achilles tendon, joint pain, prostate problems, eczema, psoriasis. I mean, these are all different indications that a person can have insulin resistance, and they may have normal blood sugar levels, and they may not even have a weight issue, but they're still insulin resistance, which means their inflammation levels are higher, which means they're at risk for heart disease, which is why when they go and they have a heart attack, they have normal cholesterol, they could be normal weight, their blood sugar levels could be good, and all along they had that silent killer, which is insulin resistance.
Yeah.
So again, the American Heart Association, they pin it on the devil, cholesterol, avoid saturated fat, which again, I can't tell you how many studies have shown that there's no correlation between saturated fat intake and heart disease.
It's the old lie, right?
So they're coming out saying these things. People are, it's a red herring. People are worried about coconut oil all of a sudden. They're worried again. Oh, I thought it was good for you. It is good for you. It's loaded with MCT. It's a mid-chain fatty acid. It's so good for you. However, they scare you away. The real problem, the real issue is the real silent killer, which is insulin resistance. So again, you may sit in there saying, my blood sugar levels are good. I went to my doctor. He had them checked. I'm normal weight. I'm not at risk. That's not true. Which is why I believe that heart disease is still the number one killer, because of all the silent peel the layers away problem that is not being addressed.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah. And the other one, we didn't mention it, but when you think of it, a lot of people have what they call a stress-induced heart attack. Physiologically, what's happened? Cortisol. Cortisol creates inflammation.
Well, sure, because
creates insulin resistance.
Cortisol, one of the purposes of cortisol is to raise your blood sugar. That's one of its primary roles, because, it's that fight or flight, right? So, you have that fight or flight, or your rest or digest. You have two parts of your, sympathetic, or, your nervous system, right? Yeah. So you have two parts to it. That fight or flight, your body gets ready to fight or flight. And in order to do both, you need energy. So your body has to give you a lot of energy very quickly. So one of the functions of cortisol is to rapidly raise your blood sugar levels. It brings it up. Of course, you're stressed. You don't need the energy. So what do you got to do? You got to lower your blood sugars down again, because high blood sugar levels are dangerous. So you secrete a bunch of insulin. Cortisol can trigger insulin. But again, at the end of the day, the problem is insulin resistance. But the cause is different.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to talk about a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different causes of insulin resistance. If somebody is high stressed, they have to deal with that. They have to deal with that overproduction of cortisol. You know, we have tremendous supplements for that. We have, and then you want to eat, again, an insulin reducing diet, which is low carb. Doesn't have to be ketogenic. It doesn't have to be ketogenic low carb, but it's got to be low carb.
Yep.
And address the underlying issues. So if the American Heart Association,
they don't sleep, right?
Oh,
so think of heart disease and sleep.
Circadian rhythm mismatches.
Exactly. But, you know, again, it goes back to what we talk about all the time. And that is, you know, what does it do? What does a lack of sleep do, right, in the body? Physiologically, right? Your cortisol shoots through the roof, right? And again, so this cascade, tremendous inflammation is set up. It's silent. You don't even know it. It gives you clues, but you're not looking. And doctors don't look because they're looking at your cholesterol. I mean, they're so hooked on cholesterol.
Or they're looking at your sugar levels, which again are important, but that's down the road.
Yeah.
Because a person has normal blood sugar levels does not mean they're at risk. They're not at risk for diabetes or heart disease. Because again, they're not going that step back.
Yeah.
Right? So it's very interesting. So at the end of the day, if the American Heart Association had come out and said, you know, watch out for insulin resistance, I wish they would attack processed foods as much as they do other things.
Yeah.
They really, you don't hear them come out too often against processed foods.
Well, they're not even they didn't talk about sugar.
No, of course not, because they you know, again.
The cereals, right? The cereal companies, you know.
Anyways, another episode in the books. And again, you know, we're almost, you know, our next episode is going to be episode 100. We're excited for that one. We want to thank you for joining us on this episode. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@martinclinic.com. You could check us out on Facebook. You do a Facebook Live every Thursday morning. You do a Facebook Live, and you get a lot of people on there answering questions.
Amazing. It's
a lot of fun. So that's a great way, again, that you can ask us some questions. Also, if you ever want us to cover something on a podcast, a lot of times we do these podcasts based on emails that we get from people. They email us and they want to learn some more about some topics, and we're very happy to do that. So again, we want to thank you for joining us. Have a great day. You've been listening to the Martin Clinic Wellness Podcast, brought to you by martinclinic.com. We are truly thankful that you took the time out of your busy day to listen. Talk soon.